Welcome to the WACO Experience, an American story.
We, the people.
With your host, D. Scott Smith.
In order to form a more perfect union.
Interviews with leaders in business, government, and nonprofit organizations.
Promote the general welfare.
Jobs, products and services, and infrastructure for strong communities. Secure
the blessings of liberty.
The WACO Experience is an American story, a story of communities across America. It is your story.
WACO is at that point in its life where it's growing, maturing. There is nothing that tells me we can't make this city better and be proud Americans. This is the greatest country in the world.
D. Scott here. In the previous episode of the WACO Experience, an American Story, we had the first of our two-part conversation with WACO native and U.S. Congressman Pete Sessions. He told us about growing up in this central Texas town and how scouting influenced his life. You can find the first part of our conversation as a podcast at our website, thewacoexperience.com, and click the Listen Now button. You'll find us on your favorite podcast apps such as Apple, Google, Amazon, Spotify, and many more. We have links to all of our sponsors on the front page of our website, thewacoexperience.com, such as great businesses like Texas Healthcare for You. It's Medicare open enrollment until March 31st. Monica Shannon has been helping my family with our insurance needs, and she will help you, especially now during Medicare open enrollment. Give her a call at 254-339-3421 or learn more at her website, txhealthcareforyou.com. That's txhealthcare, the number 4, and the letter U.com. The Independent Planner is a notebook-style planner for independent thinkers and entrepreneurs. Try out the free AI-powered assistant at independent-planner.com. Chord Buddy. This 100% U.S.-made product is the world's best way to learn guitar. You'll be playing real music on a real guitar in minutes. Available at chordbuddy.com. The Aspects of Aging weekly talk show with Christine A. Smith. Unscripted conversations with experts, providing products, services, and information about aging. Listen live at noon Central or to replays at agingbetternetwork.com. Biddy & Beau's Coffee. Hot and cold beverages and catering. Biddy & Beau's provides employment for people with disabilities. Visit them today at 110 Franklin in Waco. You can learn more about our sponsors and how your business can be featured as a sponsor at our website, thewacoexperience.com. When we concluded the last episode, Congressman Sessions was telling us about his father, Bill Sessions, who was an attorney, judge, and the 4th director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. We pick up the conversation with the congressman sharing about his father as he started his role leading the FBI.
The day he became director, he finalized the cases, agreed to them. The FBI had 2 cases. One's called Pettis, and one is called Roshan. It was African-American employees and Hispanic employees. And Dad justified it in his own way. It was hard. Nobody likes change, but said, he foresaw a day where a lot of the drug dealing, it was all in Spanish. And they had white agents who would come to court and subscribe to what was happening. But he knew that he needed to have Hispanic agents because in speaking Spanish, things can be translated differently. One word can mean one thing, another thing. And then also the management. He wanted to have managers in the business who could not just relate to Hispanic employees, but African Americans also. This included African Americans, Hispanic, and women. Dad also changed something that he felt strongly about. DNA at that time was inadmissible as evidence. And nowhere in federal court was DNA allowed. And Dad believed in science and believed that what the Bureau did should be supported under science. That if you could prove that somebody was 1 in 10 million, and you said that to a jury with great certainty based upon some facts or factors, he felt like that would be good. And of course, it also turned into a number of cases did not have the supporting data when you applied some evidence to that. They had developed it, and he was a part of this, pushing the Bureau, your hair, and he really pushed forward the knowledge that we needed to know more about DNA. And he said the Bureau should be the most leading-edge organization in the world. And they have become that. They never had enough agents to do all the things they needed, and how he changed some of the ways. And we've all seen this. We've seen when the Bureau does something, there'll be a bank robbery, and they put the little sheets of plastic on bullet number 1, bullet number 2, bullet number 3, bullet 13. And they're an investigative organization, and they learned about people, not only how many shots they may have made under this scenario, but what kind of a person that was. And they did this profiling, and really has been very beneficial. But Dad also said, when there was something that could be proven, don't go to the end of the earth to prove it. Let's get the thing done. Let's go arrest who it should be. Let's make sure we're right. But instead of having, as they do today, year-long investigations where it takes them forever to make a decision, Dad said, let's move forward when we have enough to where we can get a good solid lead, and not spend days and days and weeks and months and years. Let's move forward. And so he was a deliberative kind of person. Bureau is not always that way. You will learn that they hold things under investigation for years. And the examples that we have are of great embarrassment to law enforcement. This doctor in Michigan, who they knew about for a long time but never moved on him, and him harming hundreds of girls. It's these kinds of things where people wait until they've got it for sure, rather than, okay, go prove it on one person if that's what you need to do. But Dad was a very efficient and effective guy, and drove the Bureau that way. So it was a very interesting time in my life to watch my dad, and watch how the Bureau responded to him and how the national media did. Ronald Reagan loved my dad. George Bush liked my dad. Then he ran into Janet Reno, and Janet Reno, during that period of time, had her own ideas. Some could say today, now we've seen that story played out where attorney generals want things done their way. The occurrence of WACO occurred when Dad was the Bureau chief, when he was the FBI director. And even though the Bureau had nothing to do with it, it was the Treasury Department, ATF, the Bureau took it over. And that was a very difficult time for Janet Reno and my dad. Dad was from here, knew the names, knew the people, felt like he could resolve it. And I can just tell you, Janet Reno didn't want it resolved. Is this new news? No, this isn't new news. Everybody knew that. And so what happened, happened. And she said it'd be on her watch, and it did. So it, as the old saying goes, stormy romance.
Father, son, you have two sons.
I
Beau
do.
And Alex.
Yeah, Alex.
Alex was, in 2011, ambassador. At the same time, you also were given an award, the Quincy Jones Excellence in Advocacy Award.
Alex is a Down syndrome man, and Alex was a very gregarious, cool guy who, Down syndrome is an intellectual disability. Alex also had the characteristics all the way of that includes low muscle tone. And so he was a really cool athlete, could do splits. He loved Michael Jackson because Michael Jackson did the splits. Well, so did Alex. But Alex was raised, wanted to be just like his big brother Bill. Both scouts, both had their own places in scouting and being good. But Alex was asked to be a Down syndrome ambassador, and that is someone that they honored nationally And Alex came up and gave a speech. He had the opportunity to have a woman who was his kindergarten teacher, first grade teacher, second grade teacher, and then he moved on. But her name was Jeanette Cundiff out of Dallas, and she was an amazing supporter of Alex's. And Alex came up, and everything was good until the Washington Redskins cheerleader showed up, and then he was more interested. Believe that. Can you believe that? He was more interested in the cheerleaders.
All-American boy.
Absolutely. He figured that thing out. And so he went out and started doing stuff with them. But he gave a great speech. He has been an ambassador. But probably one of the coolest parts about Alex was years later in 2000, or a year or two later in 2005, we went to the White House. It was a day that they were putting my dad's portrait at the bureau. So the family was up. Alex would come up, Bill would come up by themselves, and Alex, uncoached, said to President George W. Bush in the White House, "Thank you for helping my dad pass the legislation that's good for people like me." I was standing right there. Shoot, I didn't coach him. I didn't say that to him. He would listen and know what was going on. But I had an 8-year piece of legislation that was lingering that I had understood, because the first year I was a member, I opened up my mail, as I still do today, and there was a letter that came from a family in Seagoville, Texas, mom and a dad, and 3 kids, but they had a baby who was born, Dylan C. James. And Dylan was a Down syndrome child who required a lot of surgery. And the parents, typically not uncommon when there's a child with an illness, the mom quit work, cut their income in half. Dad kept working, and they had some 13 surgeries that was paid for because the family then became on Medicaid. They did not have the money they needed, but they needed their baby. They focused on their baby. At some point in December, Dad unknowingly accepted a $700 bonus for his work for the year and reported it, and that took them out of being eligible for Medicaid. And so the mom and dad wrote and said, "Hey, we don't have the money to take care of our baby." Came to me, I opened it up, went to work immediately, called President Bush, then Governor Bush, got us Dr. Ren Archer, who was head of Health and Human Services in Austin. And upon calling, and he's now a very dear friend these 30 years later, Ren said, "I will take care of it." And he made sure the hospital covered Dylan C. James, who ended up passing away. But there was this piece of legislation that we said the marketplace problem was that when this would happen, the family typically would give their child up to the state, and the state would pay $50,000, $60,000 for a foster parent. Then the foster parent, on behalf of the state, because the state would take over the responsibility, then they go get the surgery. So we said, why not cut out that part? Let them keep the baby. How do you go about this? And we decided a piece of legislation called the Family Opportunity Act. We decided that what would be our law is families up to 400% of poverty, 400%, would be allowed to have their child qualify for Medicaid on a sliding scale basis. Well, Alex and President Bush had their conversation in 2005. Some 2 weeks later or so, I get a call from the Speaker of the House. I was a younger member, Dennis Hastert, who said, "Well, it's been a long ride. It's taken you 8 years, but President Bush is interested in the next piece of legislation that will be signed in law, putting the Family Opportunity Act." Couldn't even get a hearing in Congress. And President Bush, the kindest thing I've ever seen by Alexander Gregory Sessions and the President of the United States. Yes, they knew each other because we knew George W. through our parents. George W. excelled at listening and figuring out what needed to be done. Never called me, never said anything to me. I was there when they talked. He followed up and got it done. One of the more interesting parts of my life, Family Opportunity Act became federal law, still is today.
I had the chance to talk with Dr. Eric Carter and Dr. Kristen Padilla from the Baylor Center for Developmental Disabilities, doing a lot of work here in Waco to help families, to help individuals, to help workplaces, churches integrate people with disabilities into the community, into those institutions. Talk about how things have changed from the time that your son was born till that legislation passed to what you see today. And then let's talk about what you see in the future, because you're going to be starting a new session here coming up.
Yeah.
And lots of stuff to do, I know. So let's talk about the past, how you see it today, and where you're going.
It's very interesting in that you put it the way you did is also a real thoughtful way to look at it. When Alex was born, we were told, not negative things, just you're going to have to pay attention to Alex, and you're going to have to do the things that will be necessary. My wife and I took it real quickly. We took it down to we need to learn, not be taught. Because if you're taught, it means something probably pretty bad is happening. Down syndrome young babies have a series of things. They can have holes in their heart. Alex had something that's called Hirschsprungs, and that was when he went from mother's milk to food. His pipes down below clogged up, just like a clogged pipe, and he could not pass anything. And, you know, if you go a day or so and you don't do that, you better have somebody that can pay attention. Went in, got his surgery, got it done. We were lucky to have what I consider to be a great teacher, sure, a good system, but a great teacher who cared about Alex. But I ran across a guy who I got to know because he lived in Lake Highlands, Texas. He was a coach of the Dallas Cowboys, and he had Johnny, who was a Down syndrome man. He had been coach at Alabama, or I guess was going to be coach at Alabama. He had written a book on his life with Johnny. The coach Stallings had been at the St. Louis Cardinals, then came to the Dallas Cowboys, then went to Texas, then went to Alabama. Coach Stallings met with me a couple times and said, I want to work with you. So I knew Johnny, who has passed away a number of years ago, but Coach Stallings is an older guy now, nice man. But I learned how father-son, father community, father everybody else can gather around these Down syndrome people and encourage them. Alex was a swimmer. When he swam, great swimmer, we called him Splash. When he ran, he was called Dash, and he was the best in the pool. Still have lots of video of him just kicking tail. Yes, among the other students. We didn't tell him. We told him his grandfather knew how to swim butterfly, so Alex swam butterfly. He didn't know differently. I can't swim butterfly. Lots of meets, lots of Special Olympics. Same thing with track. Ran across a man who is in Dallas, Coach Randy Ford. Coach Ford has a Down syndrome daughter, a peer of Alex. It's pretty cool. Alex ran a 29.3, 220, 220 yards. Pretty good time. I think it's exceptional, but we still do every year at Baylor. Baylor hosts. We've done this for 2 years because we work together. Disability Day. We called it an Ability Day. Baylor Stadium. Brad, who is the president's husband, shows up, and Brad Livingstone comes and has a great time, and we turn the floor of Baylor Stadium into this amazing event for young adults and adults. Baylor has a great school, and the disability group over there hosts this. Really great. We'll do it probably in October of 2025. But we've done it twice now. But Alex, as an Eagle Scout, found a way to fit in and learn things. He still remembers A scout is trustworthy, loyal, helpful, friendly, courteous, kind, obedient, cheerful, thrifty, brave, clean, and reverent. And he knows the scout oath and scout law and is really proud of it. He's now 31 years old, spent the last 6 years or 7 working for Home Depot. It is, whether we like it or not, he has many of the characteristics of about a 6-year-old. Got to watch him going across the street. He used to run, he now walks, but really cool guy.
What do you see in the future for people with disabilities within our country, within the local communities? What do you see coming?
Yeah, I think a lot of it has that I've had my at least fingerprints on, which has been helpful. There were 2 other members of Congress. There were 3 now. Then there were 2. Kathy McMorris Rogers from the state of Washington, and Eleanor Norton Holmes, who is from Washington, D.C., and they also have children, young adults. Cole is Kathy's son, and he's probably 10 or 12, 15 years younger than Alex. But we became mentors of trying to think about how we could help science, medical science, but how we could help science that really helps so many other people. Not my idea, but I'm completely behind it. We understood that memory issues and things that deal with Alzheimer's, which is a senior issue by and large, they got a lot of money compared to disability Down syndrome. We said, we think you ought to move that into the same working group in National Institute of Health up in Rockville, Maryland. We think that you should begin learning, because there's something about this characteristic that happens earlier to a person with Down syndrome, and they actually were very open to the idea. And so probably 15 years ago, we moved that issue, and they started looking at things. And then there was a group out of Colorado that hired PhDs and began looking at these issues of not just cognitive abilities and how we learn and when those diminishment of those issues happens, but actually building blocks of proteins and other things that would help. I think a lot has come out of that. I think a lot of focus has been very influential into our thinking about how to look at that. Still carry very good friends who are in this area. We also passed some legislation, that when I met Gene Stallings, by and large was understood, even though Johnny was more like 40, that there was an associated diminishment of life the longer you were in this Down syndrome world because of your loss of cognitive abilities. You slowed down, your weight came back, you became, I don't want a word to use obese, but to that person became an issue. Tumors did not happen, and cancer does not happen with Down syndrome people, but other things do. And they just, by and large, get older and find a way for their brain not to be as active and move through life. So we began looking at how we could encourage long-term educational opportunities. And so there became this piece of legislation that we all got together on, and it passed, and we passed it. I'll never forget John Boehner as speaker. Surprisingly, when we passed this, what's called ABLE, I have the ability, I'm able to save 401k type savings account that parents can put in that can be used for education. Maybe it's training, maybe it's something that would help in specific, or just keeping them engaged in buying new tools that were available, computers and things. And John Boehner came back to me and said, Pete, I am shocked. I have been in circles of people well-heeled people all around this country. And what happened is they sat on boards, community boards, and they started learning that when the federal government would aid and help their community, just these people saving money, that's all, on a pre-tax basis, that it was very meaningful. So we have done a number of these things, and there are avenues where people here in Waco, you may know, we've got the coffee shop that's right over here, right across from the Hilton Hotel. And it is serviced entirely by those with an intellectual disability. And I think when people go there, they support it. They want to come and buy their coffee from there, and the conversation with these young people is amazing. There's a young man over there that will, if you give him he'll ask for it, but your car key, he wants to guess what color your car is. He's right, I'm sure most of the time. It's these angels in life, as I call them, wander among us, and it really does take a little bit of help. It takes us to recognize that they're not after, you don't have to do everything for them. As a matter of fact, you shouldn't. But you should do enough to give them a good shot at continuing their progress.
Well, I think that's a great place to wind up. I've had the opportunity to talk with the employees over at Biddy and Beau's. In fact, we did an episode where we talked with them and shared their stories. It was a lot of fun. A lot of hope and encouragement when you talk with folks who are successfully overcoming challenges, but because the community is coming together to make that possible.
There is much to be gained by every person that comes into contact. I talk about Alex in a way that we're lucky. I mean, he's made my life so much better and given me not just insight, but a real angle on also how fortunate we are. We're fortunate to have them in our life, but they are angels. They are not people who they have no axe to grind. They have nothing to fight about. They have everything to look at in a bright way, and there's something good about that. I remember when Alex was born, the physician told me up in Dallas, and she said, if the world were made up of Down syndrome people, we'd probably all live in caves, but by golly, we'd all have a good time and get along.
Thank you for taking time and being very generous with your time.
Well, I hope I did well enough to get invited back, because we'd love to have you here, because there's much to discuss. Waco is at that point in its life where it's growing, maturing. We're also stressed. We're stressed with water. We're stressed with a lot of things here. There is nothing that tells me we can't make this city better and be proud Americans. This is the greatest country in the world. And I think that when we come together as communities, we can still keep doing that. So thank you very much.
The WACO Experience, An American Story, is a production of D. Scott Smith Company, all rights reserved. Thank you for listening.